Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty. It's our favorite day of the week. I know I say that every week, but it is true every week. When we hit Wednesdays, we're on hump day. We're halfway through the week. We've gotten off to a good start, hopefully, and we're hopefully on the downhill track. When we started Finding Certainty, we actually started originally on Friday mornings. But as we receive feedback from listeners and fans and different subscribers and so forth, they all said, I wish this was in the middle of the week because it would really help me kind of get over that hump and get through to the end of the week rather than just looking forward to it all week long. So when I switched over from Voice America, my original network, to Bold Brave TV, first of this year, we decided to do it on Wednesday mornings. So appreciate you being with us this morning. We're excited to unpack this topic of certainty a little bit more. Every week I have a guest come on with various backgrounds and from different disciplines, and we address and dissect this topic of certainty. On the first Wednesday of every month, I do a monologue where I talk for the entire time. I've been going through the alphabet, if you've been following me. From A is for accountability, all the way to P was for patience last week. I guess it was about 2 weeks ago now. But anyway, our guest today is Dr. John Skidmore. He's a clinical psychologist, a performance psychologist. He focuses on helping improve performance. Well, obviously, this is a topic that plays a big role in improving certainty in our lives. If we can improve our performance, get more out of our day, more out of our efforts, and be more efficient in those ways, then obviously that can contribute to the certainty in our lives and organizations. So thanks for being with us, John. I appreciate you spending your morning with us.
Oh, Patrick, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm just grateful to have a chance to share some thoughts with your listeners.
Well, absolutely. We're excited to hear from you and take a look at what you do and how you do it and how it's helping your clients and your network to improve the certainty in their own lives. So I always start out the show sharing a couple of reasons why specifically I've invited this guest to be with us. And as I said, Dr. Skidmore is an expert in performance and in improving performance. He's worked with artists over the years. He works I'll let you tell your story, but he works in a lot of different areas that he's seeing tangible results. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to invite him to join us. Another reason is he is closely affiliated with and has worked with Brigham Young University, which is my own alma mater, which, I'm a Cougar, died in the wool. With blue blood and everything, I guess. But my mom was a honors English professor at BYU. My uncle was the dean of honors. My grandmother helped start the humanities program. So we're pretty enmeshed with the Cougar crowd. So that's the other reason I was intrigued in hearing from you. We have that affinity, and appreciate you, representing and just what you're doing. It's important. So. Starting out, I always like to go back a little bit, kind of a stroll down memory lane, and hear a little bit about who is John L. Skidmore. Where do you come from? Sure. Maybe a little bit about your family and what led you to what you're doing today as your profession.
Happy to respond to that. Actually, it's a pretty amazing story, Patrick. My mother was really quite an amazing musician on the community level and a collegiate level in Logan, Utah, at Utah State University. And my father was also a psychologist in the state of Utah, a professor at Utah State University. And so I grew up in a home with music and psychology as part of what we're doing. As a musical home, I spent a lot of time taking trumpet lessons, voice lessons, piano lessons, being in musicals, all these fun things. And loved that. It was a lot of fun. I had a vocal scholarship to college, and I got a degree in psychology. And so music was a very important thing, and it still is. And then I went on to my master's degree at Brigham Young University. And I got to perform. My master's degree was in counseling. And the second year of my master's degree, I thought, I'm missing music. So I went back in and I auditioned for the different groups. And I had the privilege of performing with a group called University Singers, which is just an amazing collegiate group. And
Yes, it
instantly
is.
I saw, wow, the tools and skills I'm learning in the counseling department were missing. They were never taught to me as a performer. At that time, sports psychology was just emerging, and I just totally immersed myself in that. And so I did my first workshop like in 1986. I've been doing workshops for a long time, helping performers develop the mindset and develop the skills that really make a difference. And so I went on to get my doctoral degree in clinical psychology, and my dissertation was on the experience of the peak performance with musicians. So this idea of studying what it really means to be in that flow state, how to get into that peak performance thing and experience that, is something I've been working on for a long time. I ended up back in Provo, Utah to start my clinical practice. And I immediately came down to the music department at BYU and handed a one-page outline to the dean and said, this is the class I want to teach, the psychology of music performance. And he looked at that and says, great, let's do it. So I've been teaching that ever since. And I do workshops around the country with different performing groups, different individuals. And more recently, I've been moving into the domain of business coaching, especially helping people with their pitches and high-pressure situations where they've got to present themselves well.
That's
And a couple of
fantastic.
things about me. I love all things outdoors. Utah's a great place for me. I love to cross-country ski. I'm the father of 4 amazing children, grandfather of 11, been married for 41 years. And one of my favorite things to do is play my Native American flute on the desert red rock of southern Utah and just meditate down there.
I agree with you. Utah's a great place to live if you love the outdoors. Right, my business
Absolutely.
partner. Yeah, my business partner Andy lives in Alpine, Utah. He's if he's not in a meeting with us, he's usually on a mountain bike trail or
Good for
a
him.
hiking trail or something like that. Right? He just and I grew up there. Right? I grew up in Bountiful, and my family lives there. My brother lives in Logan. You talk about Utah State.
Yeah.
So that's our old stomping grounds, as they say.
Yep. Yep, for sure.
So it's an interesting blend growing up with a psychologist for a father and a musician for a mother, and seeing those connections. I grew up with a father who was an administrator, a mother who was an educator, and eventually became a business owner as well. She and her friends started a franchise, a company that they ended up franchising all over the world, well, all over the country, and as well as
Mhm.
overseas. They had a handful of franchisees overseas as well. But we learn from both, right? Any
Yes.
child is a blend of their parents, and I'm interested to hear. Was there one or the other that you enjoyed more, or you were drawn to more? Was it the psychology or the music that maybe you had a more of an affinity with, or
You
was
know,
it
Patrick,
pretty evenly split?
oh, I just get to say I was very fortunate. Very fortunate. The psychologist in my father, he knew how to relate and connect with me and all of the other 4 siblings. And so that sense of relating and connecting was really, really valuable. I love to tell the story of my dad. I was in high school. My peer group got into cross country skiing. I purchased with my own money my first pair of skis. About a month later, my dad's talking to me at the kitchen table and goes, John, let's go down to the sporting goods store. It's like, okay, what for, Dad? You're buying me a pair of skis. Now that's so amazing. He wanted to enter my world. So that's one of my favorite phrases that I got from my dad is, how do you enter the world of another person, especially a father and a son? And so that's something I've definitely talked about with all the people I work with. How are we entering the people that we're relating to? And are we doing that in a way that's loving and kind? Are we doing it in a way that's respectful and uplifting? Or are we entering that world with anger or resentment or frustration? And sometimes the answer is yes, we can do both. But we want to be really aware of how to enter the world of of those around us. And that's one of the things I definitely have taken from my father. Um, my
So,
mother's
question,
drive. Go ahead.
question before you go on. Did I hear you say that he said you're buying me a pair of cross country skis?
You're buying me a pair of cross country skis.
Explain that. Explain why you felt like that was important. That he didn't say, "I'm going to go buy a pair of skis. Let's go out and ski together." Why was the part that he asked you to take ownership of that? Do you think why was that important?
Well, a couple things. Well, one, he didn't really know much about cross country skis, so I had a little experience. I think that was his way of saying, look, I want to go skiing with you. So get me a pair of skis. Let's go down and get a pair of skis and we'll go skiing. And we had some wonderful trips, cross country skiing together. So it was his effort to come into something that I'm interested in that we could share.
Yeah, I also
And
think there's an
what else?
element to that, John, that he asked you to have some skin in the game, right? It
Okay.
was a commitment on your part that it's like anything, right? If you get something for free, it's not as valuable. If you have to pay for it, it
hmm
has a little more value to you. I don't know. I'm curious to know your thoughts as a psychiatrist if there was some deeper symbolism there.
There very well could be. I saw it strictly as let's relate together. There were lots of things that he would do because I was interested in them. And, so I mean, he paid for his skis. I didn't buy him the actual skis, but
Oh, okay. Because I thought that's what you said. I thought you said he wanted you to pay for them. I was wondering if there's.
no, it wasn't about me paying for him. It's like, we're going to go down and buy me a pair of skis. You're buying me a pair of skis. And
Gotcha.
so in that sense, I didn't necessarily have skin in that part of the game. But as far as, wow, this was a relationship experience. Um, this is a funny thing. A few years later, I'm cross country skiing with my dad, and my mom's with us, so my mom had skis now too, and my girlfriend, who later became my wife, we were all cross country skiing together, and I'm showing my wife how you can jam the ski pole into the snow and pull up a basket full of snow and then fling it on people.
Yeah.
Well, I push it down, load the basket, fling it. Did not even know my dad was right behind me. I hit him right in the face. It's like, boom. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry, Dad. Anyway, those was just great memories.
That's funny. I have five children myself, three boys and two girls, and I kind of got instant fatherhood, right? I married a widow with three children. They were four, three, and one,
Wow,
and
snap. Full
we had
family.
two boys together. And I went from 0 to 4 in about a year,
Wow.
and and as I look back on our experience together, our relationship, it was those times when I showed interest in their interests, right? If that was getting mountain bikes together, if it was learning how to body surf with my boys when we lived in San
Yeah.
Diego, it was those things that weren't always even they wouldn't have even been my first choice.
Right.
But that's part of fatherhood, right? We just had Father's Day, right? It's part of it's putting your kids and their interests ahead of your own. And as I get older, it's harder to keep up with them because my boys go 100 miles an hour. My youngest is 19, and oldest
Yeah.
is 22, or the next one's 22. And it's hard to keep up, right? The older I get, the sore my legs and my knees and my ankles are,
Yeah.
and so forth. But it is. I know you'd agree. It's absolutely worth it, and even though it takes time and effort and investment and so forth,
Mhm.
you never regret it.
Never. Too often, Patrick, parents, as they are interacting with their kids, they want their child to come into their world and to relate to them in
Yeah.
their world. I had a friend who was interested in going to college, and he was interested in media production and news and this kind of stuff. And his dad was an engineer at that university. And his dad saw his transcript and said, no, you're taking engineering classes. Well, his dad was trying to pull him into his world. Let's just say it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, it rarely does.
It
Uh,
rarely
I,
does.
I've seen a lot of dads who are really into sports, and they love football or whatever, and they push their kids into football. Um, I try not to do that. I went to all my kids' events. I'd support them, but if they wanted to switch from one sport to another, I didn't really care, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. My son, who's my oldest biological son, he's a middle boy now, but he's 22 years old now, and he's a really good athlete. He was great at soccer, picked it up, just phenomenal from almost day one. And then he decided he was going to play football. And he's fast. He's tall like me. I'm 6'4". He's as tall as me. He's even an inch taller now. But he's fast, and they wanted him to play wide receiver. And so he said, okay, we'll try that. But he couldn't catch to save his life.
Oh no.
And so the coach, smart coach, he said, well, okay, let's try him in defense. He switched him over to be a defensive end. And he dominated. He was the coach said he's the best D end he's ever seen. He sacked the quarterback like 6 times the first game. I mean, the quarterbacks feared him. And he played that for 3 years. And then one day he came to me and he said, Dad, Hell Week's starting in another week or two, and I really don't want to go. I really don't want to play. I don't really enjoy playing football.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm thinking about switching over to the diving team. And I said, are you sure? I said, your coach, I mean, he's excited about you. I mean,
The coach won't be happy about this.
Yeah, the coach was not happy, but I said, are you sure you don't want to go? Your friends will be disappointed and your coach will be let down. But I said, what do you want to do? He says, I just don't love it, right? I don't want to get a concussion. And he goes, I have no interest in going and play it in college, even if they think I can. He goes, I think I could get a scholarship in diving. I'm good. We'd had a trampoline for years, and he and his friends would do like triple flips, things like that. And
Love
he
it.
said, there's a lot of scholarships. I think I'd enjoy it more. He goes, I'm a junior, but I still think I have a good chance. And he did. And now he's a Division I diver. He's the captain of the dive team at Cal State. Scholarship. He's just loved it, right? And so even though, and I think there's a lesson in this, right? And for just even from a certainty standpoint in our own lives, with as parents and as business owners, as leaders, as spouses, we sometimes have to step back from what we think is right and be willing to be open to other possibilities. And to his credit, he chose well, right? I'm glad he's not playing football. I mean, there's too many injuries and concussions and things like that. And he's had a great college experience. He'll be a senior this year, and he's loving it, right? So I'm glad he knew himself well enough, and I'm grateful we listened and didn't push him, because it was a good move.
That was just the best move you could have made right there.
100%. Yeah.
100%.
So you said you have 4 children. Congrats on being married for 41 years. That's
Yes.
I know it's more common in Utah than a lot of places, but it's quite an accomplishment.
It's an accomplishment for sure. Grateful for that.
My parents just hit 57 years. I can always remember because I'm 56, and they're I was a honeymoon baby.
Wonderful.
So let's talk more about this blend of psychology and music, because you'd think these are completely diametrically opposed. They're completely different subjects, and yet you've found a way to blend those two, both into a career, into classes you've taught, and into musicians and performers and others that you're helping. Was that a natural transition or a natural blend, do you think, or did it take a little bit of kind of cramming a round peg into a square hole? Or I'm curious to know your thoughts on that.
Oh, 2 ways to look at it. From the experience of bringing psychology to the music performance, I find that people I talk to, they're very thirsty. They want this. They want these tools and skills. And, it's great to be able to do an assessment with somebody and, get their history and background and say, oh, well, this performance was caused by a skill deficit here. And this attitude is a skill deficit. And when you start to think about stage fright, performance anxiety of any kind, as a skill deficit rather than a disease. It's like, oh, what skills do I need to manage this? It's not like I've got this bad thing. I just hate this. I fight this every time I get up there. It's like, oh, there's skills that I'm lacking. And so as soon as I started to identify these tools and skills, then it was like, oh, there's a great place where they fit. Now, the challenge, Patrick, really is the culture. One of the things that I see in the music world, performing arts world, is they're really steeped in, as is the athletic world, as is the business world. It's really about what you can produce, what you can do. How do you prepare? How do you practice? I like to refer
Right.
to it as the old school approach to performing, which I can say authoritatively is old school because that's what I was taught when I was 12. And that is about practice, practice more practice, hope, and stress at the same time. Like that's just what you're going to do. And the idea, if you know it well enough, if you do it well enough, if you've practiced enough, you'll be able to perform it great. Well, that's not true. I mean, you got to have the skill down.
Yeah.
But if someone actually came to me and said, I didn't perform well because I didn't know my music, I didn't know what to do, it's like, well, learn it. Like,
That's
why
true.
didn't you know what, just, go out there and learn it. It's the time where someone says, I can do this. I want to do this. I know I can do this. And they get up there and they choke, they freeze, they forget, they get so anxious that it just doesn't work for them and it's just miserable. And so the application is everywhere. When I first started this, very few people even talked about bridging the psychology of performance into life, really. And now it's a much more popular topic, and there's so much more available to do that. We have so much more research and resources available to us. And so, is it needed? Absolutely. Because sometimes just having a skill is not enough to present that skill and to share that skill. And that's where I come in.
It's very interesting. You talked about sports psychology, and I'm sure
Yes.
there's a lot of parallels between
Oh,
performance
they fit
psychology and
exactly.
sports
Uh,
psychology. They're
It,
almost identical, right?
it's really about the peak performance state. It's really about the brain and how we process this flow experience. And it's across the board the same. Chess players, surgeons, football players, soloists, when they prepare, they're mentally set, they're excited about this, they want to jump right into it, they stay in that wonderful flow space, and then they're out of it. And we can all learn how to do that.
Well, I can relate to that. I was an athlete myself. I played soccer and basketball, and played basketball for Orem High School there in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was as good as anyone on the team. But I remember times when I was so nervous or anxious about performing, whether because my girlfriend was watching or the coach
Right.
was deciding who would start or whatever,
Yeah.
that my hands would shake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it made it impossible to shoot effectively or to dribble.
Right.
I mean, and it I think you're right. You obviously you have to have both. Artists who have spent years even practicing and perfecting their craft, they've put in the time, right?
Yeah.
They've sacrificed. My daughter was a gymnast for the Oregon Ducks. She was a Division I gymnast as well on the tumbling
Yeah.
team, and she worked at gymnastics for years. Um, in fact, she spent about 6 hours a day on
Yeah.
gymnastics as
I believe
a
it.
teenager, and and so and yet you see gymnasts, you see athletes, you see others who, when it comes to that critical 2 minutes, right, that critical point where they're
Yeah.
going to perform, that they get stage fright or they freeze up or they mentally they can't handle it, right? Or
Mhm.
and hopefully that's not recurring, right? Maybe it's just it happens occasionally or whatever the case might be, but it's absolutely integral. I remember one experience that I just loved. I've shared it with my sales team. I've talked about it over the years on my show and so forth. But my daughter was at a competition on the balance beam,
Okay.
and she I don't know how they do that. I mean, backflips
Me.
and cartwheels and everything on a little beam that's about 3 inches, 4 inches wide, right? And this one time, I remember we were in Eugene, Oregon, and she was on the balance beam, and she fell. And literally, she hit the ground, and she bounced right back up onto onto the bar so quickly that she still got a score that was over, I think, a 9.5. I mean, it's just almost a
Fantastic.
perfect score, even with a fall.
Yeah.
And I've always talked about that. She didn't let it throw her off. She just rebounded and reset or restarted immediately so quickly. I don't even know if the judges noticed it because it was so fast. If they did, because of how she responded to it,
Yes.
they didn't dock her what they normally would. Right? If you fall, you're going to get a 8 point something, right, at the best. And I remember that she got a 9.5. We were all amazed because even with the fall, and I think there's because of her psychology and her mindset, she didn't let her throw her off. And so I thought it was a great example of that.
That is a great example. And so you look at the people that you work with and the people that are listening to this, the certainty that everything is going to work the way we want it to, that's not something we're certain with. Because it's not going to, life doesn't do that. And so your daughter, your daughter was a great example of, she didn't plan to fall off that beam. My daughter did gymnastics as well. In fact, I got to coach her team and got to coach her a number of times. It was just so fun. But see, that difficult event, that bad thing that happened, she had the skills to cope with it, and she knew exactly what to do to get back on that beam and keep moving forward. She didn't get off that beam and stay off the beam. And that's one of the things that when it comes to the skill set that we need to have that really contributes to how we manage those things, what if we were confident in our skill set? We had certainty in our skill set to deal with everything from a disaster to a disappointment to a frustration to, an unfortunate incident. But we had that confidence of we can handle this. In fact, I like to define the word confidence as I can handle what shows up versus knowing I can do it. I mean, I can handle what's going to show up.
That's really good. I think of it as muscle memory, right? You think of sprinters and other athletes. They have developed this muscle memory. The muscles respond automatically in certain ways. I mean, I shot so many free throws. I could shoot free throws with my eyes closed, right?
Yeah.
And go through the motion. Probably still have a pretty high ratio. But
Wonderful.
With my daughter's situation, with my son and his diving, they get to a point where they can go through the motions of those exercises without even thinking about it. I look at them when they dive off these platforms and they're twisting and double, triple flips and a twist. I go, how do you keep track of it all? Right? How do you not get confused in the middle? He says, I've done it so many times, it's automatic.
Yeah.
And I think it applies in both areas.
Absolutely.
So we are up against our break. We're going to go to a quick advertising break. We're visiting with John Skidmore. He's a clinical psychologist discussing this interesting topic of performance. Right? How do we make our responses, whether they're athletic, whether it's performing, whether it's business, or even just communication with loved ones and colleagues, how do we make them more muscle memory, more automatic? How do we make them more a part of who we are, not just what we're trying to do? We'll come back. We'll drill down on this more. Don't go away. Appreciate you being here with us on Finding Certainty. Welcome back to Finding Certainty. I'm your host, Patrick Laing, and we're visiting with Dr. John L. Skidmore. He's a clinical psychologist who specializes in performance. And we were talking before, Dr. Skidmore, we were talking about how you blended your love of music and the upbringing from your mom with the psychology that was both taught and modeled by your father. And you decided that the perfect blend was a blend of the two, right?
Yes.
It's interesting because I in a very real sense, I'm much the same. My dad was an administrator. My mom was an educator. I've gone on to become very detailed, system-driven sales manager and director of sales. I was a national sales trainer. I've been a VP of sales, et cetera, et cetera. But I very much blended those two backgrounds and those two expertises into one, right? As a trainer and as an administrator. And so, as you look at your career, okay, when you started out as a psychologist, was it because you missed music more so, or was it that you, when you're in the psychology realm, you thought, man, this could really benefit the artists that are out there, the artists that I know, or the artists that I've worked with? Was it a, I guess my question is, was it a just kind of a natural evolution? Was it a conscious decision? Was it that you didn't feel like psychology was fulfilling enough, so you wanted to add some more left brain or right brain? Tell me your
Good
thoughts on
question.
that.
Well, we're all performers. Every single one of us is a performer. In fact, we take on many different roles where we're expected to perform. We are the performer in this role. This is what we're supposed to do. And there's days we're at our best, and there's days we are not. And so when you talk about how I got these two fields together, really with my master's degree in counseling here at BYU and singing, is like right there, that connection was made. And from then forward, I've continued to teach and research and to write about and to do all these things that bring this idea of performance forward. Now, I've actually brought a lot of the techniques and strategies I've learned through working with musicians into my clinical office. I was famous in one of my offices where I would bring anybody who was dealing with anxiety or confidence, struggling with inability to move forward. I'd actually have them singing and dancing in my parking lot. Like, I'm going to teach you like I would teach a performer, and we're going to set up this performance out in the parking lot. It's one thing to talk to somebody and say, oh, you have some distorted thinking, it's irrational, it's cognitively incorrect, let's correct it. It's a different thing to say, well, could you just sing for me right now? Could you sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star for me right now? I wouldn't do that. I'm not a singer. Well, then we have something really to work with. So I've really blended both of these fields together. And I can also say that my activity with musicians and performance also helped me cope with some of the challenges and stress of dealing with people who are always struggling. The person that goes to the psychologist's office was here, is now here, and wants to get back to here. When you're working with somebody to improve their performance, they're here and they want to get to there. So that's a whole different kind of conversation. And so both of them work really well for me. Right now, I am moving in the direction of full-time, I want to be this performance psychologist working with people and just really helping them take wherever they're at the next level, getting those things that are in their way out of their way.
It's interesting. I had a guest on a few weeks ago named Tyler Watson, and he wrote a book called The Alignment Effect. It's really interesting. He is of the opinion, and I believe there's something to it. He's actually working with my dad right now, and my dad's in a wheelchair. He has several health issues, but he's making this enormous progress working with Tyler, and I highly recommend it. But anyway, he says that within our cells, literally, he talks about cellular alignment. He says we are actually we either have addictions or allergies, or things we're drawing to us or things we're pushing away. And he defines them as either an addiction or an allergy, right? It could be we're addicted to a physical substance, obviously, but we can also be addicted to the chase, right? Maybe we're addicted to trying to achieve something, but never quite doing so. Or, we're addicted to starting things and starting over, or we're addicted to whatever, right? Fill in the blank. But he talks a lot about the psychology of it all and the strength of our minds, and how these addictions, these allergies, this effect of pushing or pulling is built into our cellular makeup, into our circulatory system. It's an
Hmm.
interesting hypothesis, but and I've seen my dad, who's dealt with these health issues for many years, and very serious health issues, making improvements. And a large part of it was when he came to the decision that he wasn't going to be a victim. He was going to take ownership of of the uh, the leg pain he has, jumping legs, other things that he's been dealing with. Right?
Hmm.
What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on taking ownership of your outcome versus what comes at you? Life comes at you fast, and feeling like I can't control it. What happens is going to happen. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have all kinds of thoughts on that, Patrick, because I don't know anybody in life who hasn't been victimized by somebody somewhere somehow.
Absolutely.
I mean, this role that, we're going to get hurt, there's going to be problems. I mean, even if we looked at the idea of a drunk driver impacting our insurance rate, I may never have been hit by a drunk driver. Hope nobody I know would be. But that drunk driver has impacted my insurance rates.
That's
So,
right.
however we look at that, we can get hurt here. And the biggest challenge we have is to say, okay, wait a minute. This is how it is. What can I choose to do right now? And am I willing to step into a position of empowerment? Am I willing to move forward? And we don't do that in the position of the victim. Here's a fun little exercise. In fact, this morning I've been doing a presentation at the Brigham Young University Young Musician Summerfest. And one of the things I taught them is to recognize that if we're standing in a single spot right here, well, let's call this a neutral space. Well, if we stepped into our best self energy, okay, right now I'm bringing to this situation confidence and creativity. I'm bringing courage. I'm bringing commitment. I am bringing clarity. I am moving forward with this. That's our best self kind of energy. Well, there's also times where something happens, and boy, we go into just an ugly part of our brain. And all our history of trauma and drama and abuse and victimization and unfortunate and everything ugly is over here. Well, we often go from, okay, things are neutral, something happens, we go into this negative space, and we don't know how to get out of that very well. And so if someone has, like, for example, diabetes, well, if they stay in the negative space with managing diabetes, they'll simply be the victim of it and hate it. Well, if they can step into their best self with courage and clarity and confidence, they're going to do everything they can to manage that. Okay, it's a part of their life now. They're not victimized by it. They're going to learn how to manage that effectively in their life. And so, I mean, we see this a lot in business where somebody has a major breakdown, failure, whatever happens, and do they recover from that? Some of them do. A lot of them do. A lot of them don't. And again, it's how they learn to cope with that.
I couldn't agree more. Isn't it interesting that if you can bounce back and do so quickly, like my daughter on the balance beam,
Oh, I
right?
love that.
If you can, they say even fell forward, right?
Yep.
Not only do you tend to get to the outcome that you desire more quickly and more efficiently, more effectively, more likely, right? But while you're going through that trial, you feel better, you feel invigorated, you feel more capable, you attract more of that energy and those opportunities into your lives, and people see you, and it's not just a let's make sure we can do this so we can get to the end and achieve that success. The entire journey becomes more impactful. That's been my
Yeah.
experience. I'm curious to hear
Let's
your
see,
thoughts on that.
Patrick, that's one of the things that I've really developed, which I think is very interesting. You see, if we typically look at a performance from that old school perspective, I'm going to just work really hard and I'm going to do it, and it's either going to be good or bad, and I'll have to deal with this. And it's like that performance is the biggest thing that's so important. One of the things I like to do is talk about any performance is really a part of a much bigger process. And it starts when you decide that you're going to do this. Like that's when the performance starts, when I decided to do something. And then how are you preparing yourself mentally and technically or developing your craft or whatever it is? How are you working both of those skill sets? Well, there's going to come a point in time where it's time to produce, perform. Well, can we acknowledge that our preparation can be complete for this performance? And then we prepare ourselves mentally to give that performance. And then we want to be able to jump into that on that stage, whatever that is, and just give it freely. You know, you're talking about being on the foul line. Well, that's a performance. Well, after the performance, you could say, what worked, what didn't? What am I doing next time? And how am I going to keep this process going? I really believe when people start to put things into this process context, the moment you say, I'm going to do something, you can have confidence that it will be a success. It may not have the outcome you expected or wanted originally. But when you work the process on it, it will be a success to you. If you get lost in the win or the lose, the gap or the gain, however you want to describe that, then you might have a victory or defeat. And so really shifting into a process context and looking how to continually improve and develop and strengthen your ability and your skills to move yourself forward is really just vital.
What's the journey versus the destination?
Yes.
Right. There's always the end result that may be exactly what you wanted or may not be. And a lot of times in life, it's not, right?
Right.
And if your entire focus is on that end result, that destination, what happens when it's disappointing? What happens if it wasn't everything it was cracked up to be? Right? It's devastating. It's like one of my favorite quotes is that the level of our frustration is equal to the distance between our expectations and reality.
Right.
That doesn't mean we lower our standards. It doesn't mean we settle for less. It's just that we have perspective. Right? Mm-hmm. Mortality, life, it's challenging. It's going to be disappointing as much or more as it's going to be uplifting and exciting, right? And that's just part of life. And so I tell people all the time, we have foresight where we're looking forward to things, planning for things, preparing. We have hindsight where we look back, 2020 hindsight, as they say, and try to learn from those experiences. But I'll go back to, and I firmly believe that mid-sight, while you're going through it, stepping back, what can I learn from this? How can I get through this? How can I have a good attitude while I do so?
Yeah.
That is the most important piece, in my opinion. From a psychology standpoint, I would assume you agree, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, it's learning how to manage that attitude. It's learning how to change that story. It's learning how to shift that perspective. And when we can do that, we have a whole different experience. One of my favorite assignments in my performance psychology class is I have students write a description of their worst performance ever. And these are dramatic, devastating, just embarrassing, humiliating kinds of things. It's a tragedy from their perspective. Well, we start to use the skills that I'm working with them and teaching them, the psychological tools. 3 weeks later, they hand it back to me. They hand it back in as a victory statement. Now, they walked into that classroom that first week thinking this was absolutely a horrible, terrible experience. And 3 weeks later, they're saying, oh, I found a victory in this. I found a victory. And at that point, it's like, oh, it's no longer a worst performance ever. It's actually a moment of victory. And so learning how to shift that perspective is vital for the success, and no matter what we're doing.
So let's talk brass tacks. How do they do that? How do they make that shift? I think it's a really important lesson from devastation to triumph, right? From a failure to a victory. How do they do that?
Well, one of the things I do is I have them look at each sentence word by word. And we look for words that are inaccurate. We look for words that are loaded to cause stress and anxiety. Well, I should have done better. Well, in that moment, you couldn't have done any better, or you would have done it. So let's take the word should have. I wanted to do better. Okay, I can live with that. Okay. And we go through, and I was devastated. Were you really devastated? So on one hand, we're looking at the accuracy of the language and the words that we're using. So I teach them a bunch of tools and skills about that. Then the other part of this is recognizing our brain is designed to give everything a meaning. And so we default to all kinds of meanings. And that becomes the story or the history that we're continuing to live. And so there's times we get to look at this story and say, what's this story costing me? What am I getting out of this story? If I gave this story up, what would be the story I would be able to add to this? What could I do with this? And how can I move myself forward with this? I've got a classic story here, Patrick. You'll love this. So I took my performance psychology class to a climbing gym. And this totally illustrates this principle here. And we got trained and we got let loose. And I realized there was a young lady who was not climbing. Well, I approached her and said, "Are you going to climb that wall?" And she goes, "No, I'm too short." Now, I'd already told them that whatever happens in the climbing gym is a metaphor for what's happening on their stage. So my response to her was, "Oh, so tell me where being too short has impacted you as a performing artist." And she told me all these stories about being too short for this and too short for that. Her hands were so small she couldn't play Rachmaninoff on the piano. She was just short. And then I asked her where she got the idea she was too short to climb in the gym. And she pointed to the wall and said, "You have to be 5 feet 2 or taller to climb here." And I'm looking at the wall going, wait a minute. Just so you know, you're pointing to a difficulty rating for the route going up the wall. That's not a height requirement. See, in her mind, it activated her history of being too short, and she saw that as a height requirement, and that meant she was excluded. But she didn't ask anybody about that. There was no signage there. It was all made up in her mind. So the second I told her that was simply a difficulty rating, she was like, "You mean I can climb here?" And she's now climbing on the walls. So it's just an incredible story. In fact, I usually in my office, I have a little 5.2 on the wall, and I'll refer to this story a lot because her brain said she was too short, she can't climb here, and it was so far from the truth. But she wasn't willing to say, "Dr. Skidmore, we got numbers all over these walls here in these climbing gyms. What do they mean?" Well, that's the difficulty rating, and that's too short. I mean, that's the low. I mean, it's easy. High is hard. It's not a height requirement, not a height requirement. So that victory really is being able to evaluate the story and being able to look at that and say, okay, what can I change, modify in my story so I really can move forward?
You know, I've always tried to remember this lesson I learned from my dad actually years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He said if you will question every thought you have, he says, don't take it at face value, don't take it for granted. He said,
Mm-hmm.
assume that it's inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
Assume that you got to that, you came to that conclusion too quickly, and assume that the way you're looking at it is exaggerated, right? So you think about an analysis, an assessment, maybe a conversation, and we think, okay, did I understand that correctly? Did I
Right.
what I said, my impression, my understanding, my opinion of it? Do I need to question it? Because sometimes you are right? You question it, you look at it, you analyze it, and you're like, yeah, I was all right. He goes, if you slow down, it's like the old lesson. I know they teach this in psychology and in other places, but how the difference between a response and a reaction, right? And
Right.
there's a space between a stimulus and a response, and the longer that space is, usually the better the response, right? They say stop and count to 10 before you answer. So there's that, and then this question of is it exaggerated? You talk about removing words like should and never and always, and some of these extremes, because
Yes.
usually the extremes are not accurate, right? We
Right.
arrived at them too quickly, and we didn't have to go all the way. It's like one of the lessons I learned in psychology at BYU was in a family science class, said that our thoughts dictate our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Usually our negative thoughts are inaccurate or exaggerated. And if we change those thoughts, we can change how we feel. They gave an example of two employees who got sent home from work. Apparently there was a measles or something, or going around, chickenpox or something going through the office, and they said, you're allergic or you're contagious. We need to stop this, and so you're gonna have 2 weeks off from work with pay.
Okay.
Well, the one said, I can't take 2 weeks off work. I got a full inbox right now, and I'm already behind. And he goes home, he's depressed for 2 weeks, right? The other one says, sweet, I got 2 weeks paid vacation.
Right.
I'm going to go buy some junk food. I'm going to go, they didn't say I couldn't go fishing, right?
Right.
And it was this, and so when things happen to us, are we analyzing them accurately? Are we coming to a conclusion too quickly? And are we exaggerating the responses? Like if somebody says, you lose your job, and the first response is, I'm never going to get another job. I'm going to be homeless. Right. Probably not accurate, right?
Probably not accurate.
We're up against the end of the show, but is there any last thought you'd like to share just in the last minute or two? And then how can people get a hold of you if they'd like to talk to you about maybe your business coaching or...
Yes. I'd love to talk to people. My website is Dr. John, and that's JON, Skidmore.com. That's a great place to get hold of me, drjohnskidmore.com. I have 2 books on Amazon. One's called Conquering Anxiety, How to Overcome Anxiety and Optimize Your Performance. Another is called Annie Gets Unscrambled. It's a children's book for anxiety. And so that's another way to get hold of me. But please reach out.
Any last thought, John? Just in the last
Yes, my last thought would be a very simple phrase. Risk, fail, risk again. See, that's what peak performers do. They risk, they fail, they risk again. And that keeps them moving forward, growing and developing. Too many of us do risk, fail, stop. Risk, okay, I'm not going to risk, go nowhere. Risk, struggle, stress, succeed. But to be willing to just risk, fail, and risk again is a skill set. And that's one of the things I like to teach. I
love that. I see all the time, we're driving down the road, our hands are never still, right? We're constantly correcting and getting back on the road. It's like a pilot flying a plane. They're constantly correcting their course. Otherwise, they'd end up in a completely different location.
Right.
One of the most important words I've learned in business and in life is recalculate. And that doesn't mean you have to change your destination or change your goal. When we miss our turn when we're driving a car, the GPS says recalculating, and it gets you back on track. We need to look at failure and risk and everything that goes on. That when life comes at us fast, we need to look at it the same way. So, Dr. Skidmore, we appreciate you being on Finding Certainty. I thought we had a great conversation.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Yeah, honored to have you on the show, and I wish you the very best in all that you're doing.
Thank you so much. You as well.
Those of you listening, certainty is out there. I say this every week, but you can find it. We can help. We wish you the very best. You can find additional episodes of Finding Certainty at www.certaintylive.com. Check them out. Please share, comment, like, pass on the news. We'd love to help you become more certain as well. Take care and have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the certainty experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.